Good morning. Thanks for coming. As you said, my name is Sean Peasy. I'm a senior manager in the ALC department at SAS. I've been with SAS for 14 years, and I'm here to talk to you about SAS Data Maker today. For this super demo, we're going to talk about how you actually acquire and deploy SAS Data Maker. We'll have a short demo of some key features. I'll discuss how you get help and what community options are available for you. And if there's time, we'll get to some Q&A. So SAS Data Maker is a completely standalone offering from SAS. It is not tied to any of our platforms like VIA or SAS 9. And it is available via the Microsoft Marketplace. So you acquire this via the Marketplace. You can do this today. It is available as of this past November. Before you deploy SAS Data Maker, the first thing you want to do is verify any prerequisites you may need. The documentation goes over sizing recommendations for workloads, so the number of users you intend to have using SAS Data Maker, the size of the data that you want to be processing with Data Maker. So before you begin, you want to make sure that once you select your VM size, that it's available in your region and you have quota within your tenant and or subscription. This allows you to help plan that capacity based on your workloads. Some recommendations are you might want to consider reserved instances, because the way Data Maker works is we spin up compute instances as they're needed as the demand increases within the application. And when the demand wanes, we spin those compute resources down. If you choose VM types that are pretty popular or maybe limited within your tenant, you could run into a situation where we try to spin up an instance and there's no availability. So reserved instances will ensure that you always have capacity for the compute for your Data Maker instance. As I said, Data Maker is available in the Microsoft Marketplace. It's available as a software as a service subscription. So the first step towards acquiring Data Maker is to go to the Microsoft Marketplace and look for this SAS Data Maker purchase listing. This uses the Microsoft software as a service subscription model, and Data Maker is completely consumption-based pricing. So what that means is you can go and deploy Data Maker. You can do all the things in the application, bring your data in, configure your data, train a model, look at evaluation metrics at no cost to you. The cost for using the application is consumption-based based on how many rows of data you actually generate. So you can go through the whole process up to generate without incurring any cost to you other than the infrastructure costs for your Azure resources. This also allows you to be billed directly from Microsoft. So if you have pre-committed spend with Microsoft in Azure, the cost for Data Maker, the resources, and the consumption-based pricing from SAS will count towards that spend down. This also means you usually won't have to go through another procurement process to get Data Maker because it's already covered under your existing Azure spend. Once you've gone through the initial listing and subscribed to the software as a service listing, you'll get an email from SAS. And this is the point where you can move on to the next step. This email has important information that is needed to complete the next step, which is actually deploying SAS Data Maker. Even though it's billed as a software as a service subscription, Data Maker runs completely within your Azure tenant. And so the next step is to go to the marketplace and find the Data Maker deployment listing. This will deploy Data Maker as a managed application within your tenant. What this means is you have full control over your data. Your data never leaves your Azure tenant. Nothing about your personal data comes to SAS. You maintain that data sovereignty within your Azure tenant there. This is also integrated with Azure Resource Management, so you can see the price trends and cost trends of the actual resources you're running to help you plan and budget what those costs are going to be. That deployment process takes a little while because we're creating resources within Azure, spinning up VMs, deploying services. Once that process is done, you're going to get another email from SAS to tell you that the deployment is done. And you're going to review that email because, again, it has the next steps for you to proceed. And that next step is to configure SAS Data Maker by configuring your IDP to allow single sign-on so your users can log in using their typical credentials from your organization. And you must assign roles. By default, users do not have access to Data Maker even if they have the URL. Users have to explicitly be granted either a Data Maker user or a Data Maker admin role and to be able to access the Data Maker application. Finally, once you've done all that, you share the URL that was provided to you in the email and also in the software as a subscription landing page. That's the URL the users are going to use to interact with the application. This is a different URL than you got in the first email. That first email is your admin URL. That's only used by you as the administrator. The users will access the application via the application URL. So I want to talk about some key features of Data Maker that we're going to walk through today in our demo. The first is multi-table support. We got a lot of feedback as we've iterated on Data Maker over the years, and the number one piece of feedback we got is my data is not in a single table. We've got complex data models, multiple tables, relationships, foreign key relationships, and I want to be able to model that directly. I don't want to have to bring all my data into a single table. And so with this version of Data Maker, we provide that multi-table support, which allows you to maintain that referential integrity across multiple tables and preserve those relationships and those foreign key constraints as you go through the process of training and generating new data. Time series generation was another thing we heard. So being able to capture time series patterns, seasonality, and replicate that in generated data to give you the ability to do some accurate modeling and forecasting with your generated data. Finally, we'll talk about conditional generation. Now, I will say this is not yet available today, but will be available within the next couple of months. The nice thing about the way this software is deployed, it's in your tenant, but SAS will automatically push out updates, so security updates and any new features that come along automatically. So you don't need to think about doing updates on your own. SAS will manage that for you and push those updates right out. So when conditional generation comes along, you'll just see it automatically in your application. So with that, we're going to switch to a demo. And so what I have here is the landing page of SAS Data Maker. And this page shows you all of your projects that you have created. And for this demo, I'm going to create a new project and give it a name. So now I'm inside my project, and the next thing I have to do is define my data. The way Data Maker works is you provide a sample of your existing data, and that is what is used to train the generative model that you will be then able to use to generate synthetic data. There are additional features on the roadmap that will allow you to create synthetic data if you don't have data, but for now the starting point is provide us a sample of your data. And so I'm going to select a loan application set, and it's 4 tables that are related. And this will highlight the multi-table support we currently have in Data Maker. So I'm going to click Analyze, and this first process is going off and looking at your data. It's going to identify all the columns. It's going to attempt to identify semantic types of those columns based on the data in the table. If you've provided multiple tables, it's going to look across those tables to identify what are your primary keys and if there are any foreign key relationships between those tables. And at the very beginning, you saw a message about acquiring cloud resources. So the first thing it has to do is check to see if we already have a compute node running. If not, it will spin one up. Thankfully, I already had one running here, so this was pretty quick. If it has to spin one up, it's another 10 to 15 seconds. And they time out, I think, after 30 minutes. So if there's 30 minutes of inactivity, that node will spin down to save you cost on your infrastructure. So I selected 4 tables here, and I know that my payment history is related. It didn't pick up this relationship, but I can have the ability to tweak the results of this analysis step. So this payment history is related to my loan application via foreign key, so I'm going to go ahead and define that foreign key. And I know for my data, loan ID is the common key. So I'm going to select loan ID and say it's related to the loan application table loan ID field. And you can see that we've automatically updated the connection here to indicate that relationship. I can also click on the credit history table. It detected a foreign key relationship, but it's identifying the loan ID with my employment table, but I really want it with my loan application table. So I'm going to update this to also be associated with my loan table. The process for detecting these relationships is novel software within Data Maker. When we're doing flat files, like I selected a bunch of CSV files, it does the best job it can to do that. As we build out more data connections, the information in those data connections help us do a better job of modeling this data. But you do have full control, and we would recommend that someone who understands the data, a data engineer, be involved in this first part to help validate that the relationships are correct, because you want to make sure that your configuration is correct, otherwise your generated data won't be as useful. I can also go in and look at the columns that were detected for each of my tables, and I can see for each table what the columns detected were and their semantic types. We have a full suite of semantic types, and these types are more broad than, or more specific than just a string or a number. It helps you truly inform what the data is representing so that we can generate extremely good data on the back end. So some of the more unique are, if you have a string but it's an email address, you can identify that as an email address, and that helps to ensure that when we're not generating random strings, we're generating things that actually look like email addresses. Same with names, and also locations for cities and addresses. This helps inform that, so it's not just string data, it actually means something for the data. I'm going to use the defaults here to move on, but the next step would be training. And this is where we're going to choose the type of synthetic data generation we want to do. Data Maker supports 4 types of generation, 4 model types. You only see 3 here because time series generation occurs when you select a table and change its type to sequential, and I'll show that in a different project. For tabular data, we support SMOTE, PrivBase, and MST. SMOTE is a great option if you need a lot of data fast and privacy is not a concern. If privacy is a concern, you're going to want to use one of our other 2 models, which is PrivBase, which is a Bayesian network, or MST, which is a Bayesian network that uses a maximum spanning tree technique. Both of these models have a concept called differential privacy baked right into the model. And this is a differentiator for SAS Data Maker. What differential privacy is, it is a way to inject a certain amount of noise in the training process so that we can mathematically guarantee that on the back end, your generated data, you can't use any rows in your generated data to reverse engineer any individual within your source data. This is configurable, and you may need to tweak this based on your use case. The higher the epsilon value, the more noise, the more private the data is going to be. The trade-off in that is you tend to lose some of the correlation between columns when that happens. So you can use a smaller epsilon value, still get that privacy, but this is one of those things where you're going to want to do kind of an iterative training evaluation series before you actually go off and generate. I'm going to use PrivBase for this and use the defaults. The final section here is a selection of the metrics you actually want to compute. And what will happen is, I'm going to start training and I'll talk a little bit about what's happening in the back end. Again, this is going to go off and run a job. The compute resources were already there, so it started right away. It is reading the source data, it is training that model, and then what will happen is it'll generate a small sample of synthetic data, and then use that sample to create these evaluation metrics that we'll see on the dashboard at the end. Something that is new in the recent release of Data Maker, the recent update of Data Maker, is this task performance pane. And so this shows you the progress of your training process and where you are in the process and how long each step is taking. So the training actually happened pretty quickly. We're doing I/O now, which is always the longest part, so it's actually writing this out to cloud storage. This will take just a few more seconds, and then we can flip to the evaluation panel to see these statistics. I'm not going to dive too much into this, but we've got a lot of contextual help built in to SAS Data Maker. So if you wanted to get information on what these statistics are, you can go to our help. And for each one, a description of what the score is and how you interpret what this metric is telling you. So we can click through the various statistics that are created. This was multi-table, so I've got some cross-table mutual information as well. And I can also see some samples of the synthetic data to see how it generated during that training process. Now, as I said, Data Maker is consumption-based, so everything I did up to this point would have been free to me from SAS. When I click Generate, this is where I'm going to incur cost from SAS, and the way we bill is consumption-based based on how much data you generate, and that is currently $1 for every 1,000 rows you generate. And so I'm going to go through, I'm going to select my output destination and the format. We can generate data in multiple formats: CSV, Parquet, Avro, SAS formats. I'm going to pick Parquet just because today. And then you get the question of how much data do you want to generate. Now my tables here, they all had the same amount of data in it, which is not going to be typical. But an easy way is using magnitude. So magnitude is relative to the source data, how much do I want to do? If I choose a magnitude of 1, it's going to create the same amount of data as I had in my source data. If I put a 3 here, oops. It'll automatically update, and I can see on that total number of rows is 6,000. So if I were to generate this, this would cause a $6 charge billed to Microsoft. I'm going to go back to 1 just to do generate. And at this point, like I said, Data Maker is a standalone application. So once you generate data, you'll have the ability to download that data, and then you can take it into SAS Viya or to SAS 9, or use it for whatever other processes you want or need for your generated data. While that generates, I'm going to switch gears, and I'm going to go into the time series project I have here. And I have a transaction table here that has time series data in it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this model. And as I said, you're going to do a lot of iterative development here. So once I've trained this model, I have a set of evaluation statistics. If I want to tweak it, I can click that button to make a copy. This opens it up for me to go in and change my training settings. I can see that I've set this table to a sequential type. And if I go to my training tab, I see additional settings now for how to configure that sequential time series model during training, which I did not have before. Training a time series model does take a little bit of time, so I'm not going to do that, but we can go to evaluation, and I can see a prior run, and I get a lot of the same information that I did, and I don't know why it's displaying improperly here. If I go back to my super demo, on the generation, I have the option to download that data. I can see a sample of the generated data and some distribution-specific metrics. And that's pretty much it for generation. Currently, the way generation works is it maintains the ratios in your data from your source data. So if you had, for example, 40% male, 60% female, your generated data is going to have roughly 40% male, 60% female. If you have rare event data, it's going to maintain your ratio of event to non-event. As you saw on main stage, we've got this concept of conditional generation that is coming. I can't show it live, but I do have a recording, and we're going to skip ahead to the generation panel. And when the feature is available, you'll see this apply conditions option. And what this will allow me to do is, for a particular table, select a column. In this case, it was fraud, which is, they were trying to detect fraud, which is a rare event. We can select the value we want to over or underrepresent, and then define the number of rows. So for this, it's going to ignore the ratios in my source data, and it's only going to generate the rare event case. So that allows me to augment my data with those rare events. I can take that table, merge it with my source table, and that gives me kind of that original data, but with some additional rare events to help me in that modeling process. So that. Also, because Data Maker is a marketplace application, the way you get help is a little different from your typical SaaS product. Help is all driven through our SAS Data Maker support community, and this community has a ton of information out there. There's documentation and tutorials. This is where you will submit support tracks and get resolution and track those support tracks. You can participate in community discussions specific to synthetic data and Data Maker. And this is where we'll post updates on new features as they get released. There is a really great video out there on the full deployment process. So I kind of skimmed through it, but it's a video that walks you through each step, shows you what you get, the fields you're going to configure when you deploy Data Maker. So I highly recommend you watch that video so that we can get people installing Data Maker. Before we go to questions, I do want to call out some additional sessions today and tomorrow specific to synthetic data. I want to call out the hands-on workshop today at 2:45. It's over in the Vineyard Towers. When I checked right before this, it's nearly full. So if you're interested in a hands-on workshop for Data Maker today, go into your event app and reserve a spot there. There were only a few spots left. So, but with that, I will turn it over to you for questions. I got 1 minute for questions.
Real quickly, thank you. This is excellent. So does it only work on the Azure platform? Okay.
Yes, currently it's only supported in Microsoft on Azure.
CSV output, is that the only format of output?
No, the file formats that we support are CSV, Parquet, Avro, and the SAS 7 BDAT format. So that's supported on input and output.
Okay.
And you can choose different. So if you can import CSV and output Parquet, which is what I did in the demo.
Thank you. And has it proven to improve MAPE, being absolute percent error in real world applications?
I think so. Brett might be able to answer that question, but I'm not the data scientist, but we have shown that applying synthetic data, augmenting your data with synthetic data during the training process does improve model performance. All right, thank you everyone for coming.